No, 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 no. You did. You you put in the time. Don't.
Well, there was concern about whether or not she was going to have ankles. And thank God I she has ankles, or she has cute ankles. Her brother does not have cute ankles, but it's good that he's cute. It's not being recorded for
Don't worry. Yeah, we haven't officially begun. It does not have to appear in the minutes. We will. No one will ever. Aspersion. We will.
It's going viral.
All right. Yeah. Exactly. No, we will never. Confidential here. Good evening. Welcome to a special meeting closed session of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. It is Thursday, June 8th, 2017. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll call. Director Welsh?
Here.
Vice President Natoli? Here. Directors Hassai and Cordova will be joining us from separate locations in Europe during the open session. We will now make time for public comments. Seeing as there are none, we will adjourn into closed session. Good evening. Hello? There we go. Good evening. Welcome to the open session of the June 8th, 2017 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I am Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will now take roll. Vice President Natoli?
Present.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Cordova?
Here.
Director Hassai?
Present.
All right. I thank both directors present as well as our European contingent. We are well-traveled people. The board has nothing to report out from closed session, so we will move on to public comments on items not appearing on the agenda.
Hello? There we go.
All right, great. There you go. Is that better? Yes. My name is Simon Brofman. I was at a meeting at the KCC the other night, and we had a presentation by the architects who are doing the remodeling, the drawings for the remodeling of this. And I just want to make sure that they realize that one of the key things has to be that this new building be eco-friendly. We might look at the various ways in which we do the heating. We should not have air conditioning. The way the water is heated is another issue. Appliances in the kitchen, and one other thing we might look at is putting in solar panels. I know that at least one of the fire departments in El Cerrito has solar panels on the building, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Lipscomb. Is this too loud? I'm trying to be not as loud. Okay. I just wanted to, because I know that you are continuing in your efforts regarding the future lease space of this district from the allegedly separate fire district, because I view us as one community, that we keep it in mind that we should continue to ask for the $1 a year lease. So to the extent there are any negotiations going on regarding the future occupation of this district, of the current building or any future building, I hope that you will urge the notion that the taxpayer is on both sides, the same taxpayer is on both sides of the transaction. And I'd like to state that as often as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Dr. Ann Stevens-Delk. I moved to Kensington in 1966 and soon had my first encounter with the Kensington police after repeatedly coming home from the university late night, early morning in an old car with a busted muffler. I did not get busted, only told to get it fixed or to come home earlier. Ricky Hull was not that officer, but he has been with KPD for 20 years. So I was surprised that in the last 6 months, it was said repeatedly that the Master Sergeant had not been properly vetted and should not serve as interim general manager / chief of police, although he had actually done so previously several times.
Dr. Delk, I don't want to interrupt you, but there is an item on the agenda concerning his appointment.
It's not about the appointment,
All right.
okay? Not being, well, it could be about the appointment, but I believe that I may comment either before or during an agenda item. It's the strict wording of the Brown Act.
All right. I will refer to Ms. Danforth, yes.
Is that correct?
Not entirely. You are certainly entitled, you have two rights. One is to, in the public comment period, address the board on matters that are not on the agenda, and then subsequently, as to matters that are on the agenda, you have the right to address them before they take action. So if this is with regard to the appointment that is on the agenda for tonight, then your comments should wait, technically.
How about just letting me finish this? Okay. Any objections out there? All right.
No, but I will say, I have never heard you admit to your first name before.
I know, it's coming up. All right.
I was gonna say, true.
All right. Now, I will not start over. I'm sure you have perfect memory. Not being good at words, I thought I'd better look up the exact meaning of the verb to vet. I chuckled when I discovered it is an old horse racing term, to check out a horse before a race. Kensington Downs has been under different board owner trainers every 2 or so years, and 5 Jim Cop thoroughbreds during Ricky's time. Whenever the chosen entry had been scratched, he had been quickly led out of the stable, saddled, mounted, and set off a-running. He has been Kensington's old Stewball. We bet on Kevin 1, we bet on Kevin 2. If we had just bet on old Ricky, we'd been better off, 'tis true. I thank you, Chief, for another fine race, and I hope you will not be heading out to pasture anytime soon. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Jim Watt, always a tough act to follow. I would like to comment on some issues that I believe the board needs to address. The first is the budget. I was surprised that the budget was not included in this evening's packet. I say this because Section 3020.3 of the Policy and Procedures Manual states that the proposed, quote, the proposed annual budget as reviewed and amended by the Finance Committee shall be reviewed by the board at its regular meeting in May and thereafter adopted at its regular meeting in June. This calls for 2 hearings on the budget by the board, both of which have to occur once the Finance Committee has approved the budget. I therefore assume you need 2 readings in June before the budget is approved, and I would suggest you ask our general counsel to verify this. The second item that concerns me is the failure of the board to take a more active role in the plans by the fire district to upgrade the existing public safety building. As you know from the article that appeared in this month's Outlook, the fire district has scheduled a community meeting to discuss their plan for the replacement of the public safety building. Given that the KPPCSD is expected to pick up 1/3 of the costs of this upgrade, I would think that the plan for this upgrade would be of utmost concern. I have taken a close look at the proposed replacement building, and I believe there are many aspects about these plans to include the size, design, and costs that require the input of this board as part of the fire district's planning process. I think you need to include a discussion of these issues as part of your June 22nd meeting agenda so that you can provide guidance to the fire district at their meeting on June 24. You also need to complete an analysis of the different options and costs for the relocation of the police department during the reconstruction of the public safety building. I would recommend that a committee of volunteer citizens undertake this analysis. Finally, it is time for this board to investigate the costs of contracting out police services. Signs are sprouting up all over Kensington about keeping the police department independent. But since nobody knows the cost benefits of contracting out, it is way premature to take a stand one way or the other. Only an analysis of the cost benefits will provide the basis on which a final decision can be made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Carl Queer. I am happy to see the 3 of you here because I'm assuming that you didn't have another place to go to, and that's why you're here. I may recommend Europe this time of the year if you stay away from Southern Europe or Western Europe because it gets kind of hot there. Anyway, I got up to say that I'm disappointed I did not see financial statements in our board package.
Thank you.
Celia Conkus, and I am speaking on behalf of Mabry Benson, who is also abroad. She's traveling in Czech Republic, and she did go through the, am I speaking too loudly? No. Okay. And so I'd like to just say that Mabry's comment is that it is June and there is no budget in the packet. So it has been noticed. I also, on my own behalf, want to say that I did attend the last Budget Committee meeting, Finance Committee meeting, and where a preliminary budget was discussed, and in that budget, there was funding for hiring an additional police officer. I strongly recommend that you not hire another police officer and that you take into account the fact that for many years, we were without at least 2 officers. One officer was at least half to possibly full-time working ostensibly for WestNet, the crime detection organization that was working in West County. The other one had spent many, many months at a state group that was training people who were already familiar with computer management, and he was developing his skills. And so we had 1 or 1.5 full-time officers, both who happened to be sergeants, who were not serving as police officers in Kensington. And the crime statistics did not increase during that time. We did just fine. So I strongly urge you not to budget for another officer and look at the fact that we do need funding to improve this building, and it is very important that we have that funding.
Thank you.
Piggybacking on what Celia just said, I think that matters of staffing were exhaustively studied in an audit of the police department by Brown Taylor. I believe that may be on your website right now as a document you can examine with the recommended staffing patterns. You have the input of Chief Hull, and certainly you will have the input of the new general manager. I strongly suggest that citizen input regarding staffing is the wrong place to look for professional guidance.
Thank you.
I would like to respond, and that is, Brown Taylor also said that the officers had a great deal of discretionary time. I believe that he put in a number of something like 70% of their time was free. And I don't mean free financially, that they had time to use for other things than policing.
Dave Spath. I also attended the Finance Committee meeting the other night, and I would certainly urge the board to take an opportunity to engage the new general manager, task him with a review of the police department, what its needs are, what type of force structure is required, take into account the Brown-Taylor report, which I think 70% is a misreading of what the conclusion was, and then come back at a later date and provide you all with a recommendation as to whether maintain the existing force structure, if not, what the recommendation would be, and how that force structure would be applied in terms of coverage here in Kensington. You can always hold that position vacant for a period of time, and in fact, the interim Chief Hull even said at the Finance Committee meeting that he wasn't intended, or the intent wasn't to immediately put someone in that position because it really wasn't anyone there available at the time. They haven't even identified someone. So it would be imprudent to make a rash generalization that just because you had officers who were on disability and you had to cover it with overtime, that all of a sudden you can get away with fewer officers, and what does that look like from a coverage standpoint? I would also suggest that you look at some of the other communities, such as Ross, such as Belvedere, 2 communities that are demographically similar to us, that even Jim Watt used in an earlier report for comparable purposes. They have a ratio of officers per 1,000 population that is even higher than us. It's over 3. I would even suggest you look at Hillsborough. where your general manager was a general manager for 18 years. Their ratio is almost 2.5 officers, sworn officers per 1,000 population. And their crime rate is slightly lower than ours. And certainly Ross and Belvedere's is lower than ours. So if you use that as an example, which is really not what you should do, but you would certainly conclude that you need more officers, or your officer strength is just right. If you look at Albany or El Cerrito, they have higher crime rates, they have fewer officers per 1,000 population. One would, in a simplistic standpoint, conclude that they don't have enough officers. So to use those statistics is just an imprudent way to do things. Task the general manager to take an honest look at what is needed and have him come back to you with a recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Bergen, let me fix this. Okay, just a reminder that this is a new microphone and we don't have to kiss it because then it's too loud. So be a little ways away from it and make it easier on my ears anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to board comments.
I just have a short comment that there's going to be a meeting of the Solid Waste Committee tomorrow and discussing a number of options that are facing us, including perhaps some additional waste containers around Calusa Circle with the farmers market, and then also there's a new state mandate to increase diversion rates of organics, and that's going to be coming down the pike in the very near future. So that'll be tomorrow in this building, thanks, at 2 o'clock, and everything's on the website.
All right, thank you. Do you have anything, Lynn?
Yeah, I do. I want to particularly thank, I appreciated all the comments. I wanted to particularly thank Jim Watt and Linda Lipscomb for their comments. Jim, I thoroughly agree that we need to be participating more in the decision to be made at this point by the fire district on how to deal with the need for either an upgrade or replacement of the public safety building. I know the most expensive plan, which so far they seem to have been pushing more than any other, would be in the range of $10 million. So I do think we should participate more, although at this point I don't think we have enough information to be actually taking an official KPPCSD position on it. I think that meeting on the 24th is going to be pretty critical, because that's where the fire district gets to present its recommendation and rationale, and we get to say, well, what about the other options? I personally am going to be very resistant to anything other than an upgrade of the existing building if it can't be justified why that's not an option, because the other options are far more expensive. And I also, sort of piggybacking on what Linda started to get to with saying that we shouldn't be charged rent for the public safety building, I believe that the two districts should get together in the interest of the single community they both represent and figure out how to finance both the upgrade of this building and doing whatever is necessary for the public safety building, figuring that out together, because both districts have equal right to spend on those projects, and figuring out how to do that so that there is the least amount of budgetary stress on the community.
I just want to be careful that we're not speaking too much on things that are not agendized.
No, I'm getting that out there, I'm responding to that
Sure,
thing,
I
and I'm not
understand.
trying to create a discussion, I just want to get that out there, so.
Yes.
And thank you both for those comments. I think that's a big elephant in the room, and we need to start focusing on it.
Directors Hasai or Cordova, do either of you want to make a comment?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, I'll just remind folks that the annual KPOA meeting is in the community center. I believe contrary to the sign on the Arlington, it's not from 6 to 10 a.m. So I think that it probably begins at 10. It begins at 10 a.m. here this Saturday. Director Natoli Vice President Natoli will be here, as will the KPOA board, of course, and many others. And then the third Wednesday of this month is the Park Committee meeting, which will also be in this building. And the fourth Wednesday is the Standing Finance Committee meeting. So watch for those notifications, and please feel free to attend. Any staff comments? No, all right. Then we will move on to item 6, the consent calendar, which begins on page 4 of the agenda. If anyone would like to pull items from that calendar, please let me know. E, all right. Okay. Any other? All right, then Dr. Delk will let you begin with comments on item E, which is page 32 of the agenda.
A. Stevens Delk. First of all, I want to thank you for putting this in the agenda packet. We're talking about the transaction details of the BV account. I have a question about the first 2 lines, $4,200 that came in from Bayview, and it went out to a KPPCSD fund account. Can you tell me what that is about?
That would have been, that would have been a year-end adjustment that was made by our CPA, Deborah Russell.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any further comment? All right, then I'm going to move that we adopt the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, all in favor, and we will have roll call due to 2 directors commuting electronically. So, Vice President Natoli?
I agree.
Director Welsh?
Yes.
Director Cordova?
Yes.
Director Hasai?
Yes as well.
And I also vote yes. So the consent calendar is approved, 5-0. All right, now we'll move on to an update on our dispatch contract from Chief of Police Hull.
I guess I'll start with the fact that the City of Albany has approved the contract, so we are moving fast forward with building the infrastructure in order to support the dispatch and records management system. The biggest part of that project is to get the fiber optic cable laid so that we'd have the bandwidth to be able to run the software that we're going to with the Sunridge company. It initially they said it was going to take 120 days, but they've expedited the process. I'm hoping for a very, very lofty goal of the 28th of June. If we don't make that, I expect it to be done within a few weeks after that. The good news is even if the fiber optic cable is not finished in a timely manner, we can still make the transition over to Albany as long as the radios and the phones are connected and the software for the computer and dispatch-related stuff can be done via the mobile data terminals in the vehicles because that's going to be connected via cellular. So we'd only have a period of time before we can get the computer stations inside the police department running with that software after the fiber optic cable gets laid. So I believe that the district will not have to pay out extra money to the city of Richmond to maintain a relationship with them beyond July the 1st, which is when our contract ends.
I just have a comment. I want to commend Chief Hull for all his work on the dispatch. I know in addition to all his other duties as interim general manager and chief of police, he has managed to attend to many, many details of the dispatch contract. I'm amazed, because when you think about calling 911, that's all you think about is calling 911, and you have no idea how complex it really is. So I just want to thank you very much, and definitely send my appreciation for all your efforts on this. Thank you.
It's not the Warriors. You don't get that excuse. All right, we're going to move on to item 8. The board will review and consider the approval of the appointment of Anthony Constantoros to the position of the KPPCSD General Manager under the terms and conditions outlined on the contract that begins on, the contract doesn't begin on page 38, so I want to tell you where it does. My comments, the staff report does begin on page 38, but page 45 is where the contract starts. I'll be happy to introduce this item. Tonight, I think we take an important step in bringing the district closer to its professional and procedural potential. By hiring a general manager with educational and practical expertise, allowing our chief of police to concentrate on all aspects of public safety, we bring new possibilities to Kensington. The board began this discussion several years ago. Director Cordova and myself had outlined in, I believe, May of 2015, a document that discussed the potential of splitting the positions. The ad hoc committee was formed later that year. They explored the issue. And this board began in January. We first sought consultation with a representative of the public law group, Bob Dice, who guided us through the procedure and helped us prepare, assess our needs, helped us prepare a job, an employment announcement, and helped us recruit candidates. And he gave us such a wonderful group of people to choose from. It was a bevy of riches, but we were delighted to meet Mr. Constanteros, who will correct me if I ever pronounce his name wrong, please, who had the unique skill set, I feel, I believe the other directors will make their own comments, to guide Kensington forward. You're welcome to read the full report that begins on page 38, but now I would like to take comments from the other directors and the public.
I'll go first. Well, you're getting a little slice of what you're getting into tonight, Mr. Constantoros. I am thrilled that we've hired you, and I think the community is going to be thrilled to meet you and to work with you. This is something that's been long overdue. I assure you we'll have you hitting the ground running when you start, and it's going to be this Monday, right? Well, welcome. It's just wonderful to have you on board, and I don't think we could have found a more qualified candidate anywhere. He's quite impressive. I will note that we were all in agreement. We all had complete consensus among us, the board members, that he's absolutely the best choice. So thank you for being willing to work with us, and look forward to working with you.
And I will second both Richelle's comments and Len's comments. All the candidates were very impressive, and I'm absolutely delighted that you're here tonight. One of the things that I learned, though, in this process is how did we manage without having a general manager? And it is impressive to look at all the accomplishments that the general managers that we interviewed have, and yours are very impressive as well. And I just can't imagine how we could have survived without having someone with the skill set and the education as well as we have. So I'm absolutely delighted that you're here tonight. Thank you.
Director Cordova? Oops, I'm sorry. I turned down her.
Second,
There you go. Go ahead, sorry.
all right, I'll try again. Great. I too want to welcome you, Tony. When Rashid and I, 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, first contemplated sitting of the position, I don't think I could have dreamed of a better candidate. And I also want to acknowledge the work of Bob Dice, who, as Eileen mentioned, found just an impressive coterie of candidates from which to choose. But as Len said, you were clear out, and I feel so lucky to have you not only but your candor, and you're lovely to be around. Conversation with you, I learned something. Really value that, and I think you're so welcome and for accepting the position.
All right. Director Hasai, would you like me to read your comments, or would you like to make them?
I will try to make them, and if it is not working well, I would be happy for you to read them.
All right. Give me the high sign, audience, if you cannot hear. Or I'll make her comments, we'll make her written comments publicly available. Please begin.
Last fall, I spoke to several hundred Kensingtonians as I campaigned to represent and serve residents as a KPPCSD director. For a vast majority, one of the top priorities was the separation of the role of the district's general manager from the chief of police. Residents recognize that the difficulties that have at times roiled our town over the last 8 to 10 years stem in part from the inherent conflict of interest in combining the roles and granting the responsibilities of the two positions to one individual. The priorities and skill set necessary for success are vastly different for each role. The foundation of good governance is structure, policy, and process. It does not and should not rest on finding the quote-unquote right person. As a special services district, we are required by statute to have a general manager, and as such, an empowered general manager is most directly responsible for the smooth functioning of the district as a whole. As your elected representative on this board, I fully support appointing Tony Constantoros as our new general manager. As a former city manager, he has years of providing civilian oversight of police departments, financing and overseeing capital improvement projects, soliciting appropriate community input, communicating with residents, and improving the efficiency and quality of services, among many other relevant experiences that he will bring to bear to Kensington. He has high standards and a quiet steadfastness about him that will positively impact the operations of the KPPCSD. I am confident that Tony has the right combination of skills and personal qualities that will make him successful in addressing the challenges facing, as well as the opportunities presented to our district. He possesses the high level of experience and professionalism Kensington's residents expect and deserve. I promise to separate these positions, and I am pleased to be able to fill that promise this evening. It is with the utmost confidence that I will be pleased to vote yes for this contract, making Tony Constantoros the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District first independent general manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there public comments? All right.
Good evening, Jim Watt. Good evening, Mr. Constantoros. Did I pronounce that correctly? Welcome to However, I would like to point out that in taking a look at your past history, I took advantage of going to the website for the city of Hillsborough, a town of 11,000 people with very wealthy inhabitants, to see how police services were handled there. To my surprise, I found that with twice Kensington's population, Hillsborough maintains a police force of about 26 sworn officers and a support staff of 10. Hillsborough's total police payroll is 3 times that of Kensington's, and according to CalPERS data, their average sworn officer payroll is $137,000 versus $103,000 for Kensington. The CalPERS data also shows that Hillsborough will have to contribute $1,254,000 in budget year 27-18 to meet its pension obligations, versus $467,000, about a third less, for Kensington. In fact, Hillsborough has identified their rapidly rising pension costs as one of their biggest challenges in the years ahead. The result of this very bloated police department is that Hillsborough has an unfunded pension liability of $10.1 million versus $3.1 million for Kensington. Yes, Hillsborough has a very low incident of violent and property crimes, but so does Kensington, while spending 1/3 less on police protection. I hope our new GM will adjust his thinking to the type of police department that Kensington needs and can afford. Now to the issue of the proposed GM contract. It is suggested in tonight's packet that by hiring a GM at a cost of $100,000, we should expect that the GM will provide cost-saving measures to offset his salary. Sounds reasonable, but there's no indication in the contract that this is expected. Rather, the contract simply describes the GM's duties as being consistent with Government Codes 61050 and 61051, as well as District Policy 2000. But District Policy 2000 says the GM is the executive officer of the district and subject to the terms of his employment agreement. Government Code 61051, on the other hand, says that the GM is to implement the policies established by the directors, in addition to supervising employees, facilities, service, and finances. So what are these board policies, and how will they be able to evaluate the GM's performance? Actually, the Policy and Procedure Manual number 2000.25, which includes recommendations from the Brown-Taylor report, specifically outlines a process, which process, unfortunately, has never been followed by the district. This process requires that the board, in conjunction with the general manager, jointly develop written goals and objectives before the commencement of each new fiscal year, which starts July 1. That leaves you with about 3 weeks to get this done, and I would hope that the public could see these goals at the next board meeting on June 22nd. Thereafter, Brown-Taylor provides a specific guideline for how a performance review should be completed. Finally, at the very least, I would hope that you and the board would include as an exhibit to this contract the job description that the board produced several months ago for the general manager's position. I would, however, expand that list to include that the GM is responsible for implementing the goals and objectives to be set forth between the board and the GM. I'm going to hand out 2 changes that I would make to the contract, including the front page, which refers to the Exhibit A, and the proposed Exhibit A for your consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, speaking to this, to the statement made by Mr. Watt, you're wrong on the process not being followed. During the time that I was on the board, in a timely manner every year, we met to discuss the performance of the Chief of Police General Manager, then a combined position, and exhaustively, with the subcommittee, went through all of the goals and objectives and the criteria, developed them on our own, gathered them from the balance of the directors, met, and discussed what action should be taken, including the implementation of any increases that ought to be given or not given, depending on that performance. And so that's simply untrue that the process was never followed. It was indeed during my tenure.
Thank you.
May I speak again on behalf of Mabry, who is not here? First, I would like to welcome you. I'm very happy to have you here. Mabry writes about the agreement, the GM agreement, and she refers to the section on page 47, and it is section 6D, in the event that the general manager should become disabled. And she asks, will the district need to be covered by workman's compensation? Then she asks about section 7B, and this is the section in which she is saying that she hopes that the board will evaluate at 6 months and a year to begin. In fact, she says, she suggests that the first year an evaluation or some sort of review be done at 4, 8, and 12 months, so that you have some guidance as to where you're going. And the last is on page 49, and that is the section that deals with a computer being given to the general manager. And she says here that, I hope this computer will be dedicated to district business alone, and that there are security requirements regarding the use of the documents it may store. Actually, she writes, she not only hopes, she insists that the computer be used solely for this district's business. Thank you.
I'm Paul Doro. Welcome, Tony Constantouros. We have high hopes for your tenure here as general manager. One thing that I'm sure you can see already you will not lack for is advice. So take it for what it's worth. I think we're all trying to pull on the same team. One thing that hasn't been said here that I'd like to just acknowledge is the board did a really terrific job in recruiting and securing our new GM. It was a long time coming. It wasn't always easy. A lot of back and forth and controversy about it, but credit where due, I think the board really deserves congratulations for getting this done.
To follow up on a few questions, I do believe we also require workman's comp for Mr. Constantoros.
He is an employee, so yes, he will be covered by our workers' comp
Yes.
policy.
And in terms of putting directions into the contract, was not in the interest of the board, as the contract is a binding agreement. We're looking for a relationship with Mr. Constantoros from this date until 2020. So putting in specifics into his contract regarding duties could possibly bind a future board. I know that he is happy, and we are happy to work on direction and policy with him, and the board will be developing that in the very near future, because he will not lack for ideas. Just as you are so willing to give advice, so are we. Now, I have a long speech that I could bore you with, but I won't. I will just simply say that it was a pleasure, this process, because we had such wonderful, we had a wonderful working relationship together. We enjoyed working with Mr. Dice of Public Management Group so much, and as much as it can be said to be a pleasure to interview or be interviewed, Mr. Constantoros made it that for us. I believe that his most outstanding quality was the composure and temperament that he has illustrated to work with a variety of elected officials, community members, and staff over a long duration, prioritizing not the needs of one, but the needs of the community. So now I would like to make a motion that we approve the contract for the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District General Manager Employment Agreement.
Can I just make one, I think there's a little typo on page 48. Item B. The last line, evaluate manager's performance after the first 6 months. The word "and," I think, is missing at least once a year thereafter.
All right. With the friendly amendment to add "and"?
I'll second the motion. I just want to make one comment about the contract and what detail it does not get into. If this is going to be a successful relationship, most of what's going to happen is going to be through communication between the board and Mr. Constantoros, as well as communication between Mr. Constantoros and the public. And that's really where the meat of what he's going to do is going to be worked out. The contract serves as a basic blueprint, and I think it's fine the way it is, but the real action is going to come through the relationship we develop and the different issues that get fleshed out and our discussions about how to address them. So I just want to make that comment. We have to draw the line somewhere in the contract, and if we have to spell everything out in writing, that means there's something wrong with the relationship. So I fully support the contract as written.
All right. We'll take roll call. Director Welsh?
Yes.
Director Cordova?
Yes.
Director Hasai?
Yes.
Vice President Natoli?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So by a 5-0 vote, we welcome Mr. Constantoros as our first general manager. And we'd like to ask Tony to make they're clapping as well. Would you like to make a comment, Tony, at this time?
Thank you. Thanks to the board. And I did have an opportunity to meet some of the community members before the meeting. I'm a real believer in local government. I think it's probably the most efficient and model form of government, especially when you compare it to the federal government. But, I'm a true believer in local government. It's hard to believe, as you were talking, I have nearly 40 years' experience in local government, and I I can't believe it myself sometimes, but I've worked in 4 Bay Area cities. They were all excellent, although Hillsborough was my favorite, and I liked working in Hillsborough so much I didn't expect to find another community that would interest me until I came to Kensington. And I think Kensington shares many of the values, especially the high expectations. And I like high expectations, and I also welcome feedback. And if you have, I welcome positive and negative feedback too, because that's how I can improve, and that's how I can address your concerns.
Of course, Tony, the trick will be your email address, getting that correct.
Yeah, keep it hidden.
Email, what's email? I'm a believer in continuous improvement. It's part of my philosophy that an organization is always improving. It doesn't stop improving. There's always ideas to make things better. And I also am a believer in community participation and responsiveness to the community. And so each community has their own priorities and needs, and my role is to help find them, guide them, and get them done. And other communities may disagree with them, but the important thing is that they're fundable, they're financed by the community, and that the budget's always balanced. And I help guide the communities. I enjoy doing that. I'm glad to get back into local government. I do want to say that the citizens in Hillsborough did approve a tax upon themselves to fund the police department that they wanted. So the police department is fully funded by a property tax that they passed by 80%. So that's the department they wanted. And I will do what Kensington wants, and I'm interested in hearing from you, and I'm glad to hear your comments. My family wanted to come here tonight. My wife was unable to be here. My daughter wasn't able to be here, but my son is here, and I want to introduce my son, Jason.
Oh, thank you.
He's in the last row. Jason is currently working on the state budget in Sacramento and came down just for this meeting and is returning immediately to help solve the budget problems. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And we will try and send you home to your family on occasion. All right, we will have a brief break for refreshments in a short while. But now we'll move on to item 9. The board will review and consider the approval of the appointment of Chief Ricky Hull to interim Chief of Police for the Kensington Police Department under the terms listed on page 57. This contract runs from, well, ostensibly, he has a contract through the end of the month, as you know, and this new contract would run from July 1st through December 31st of this year. Chief Ricky Hull was first appointed by this board in December of 2016. Since that time, he has guided us through the research and implementation of the new dispatch contract, developed positive relationships with surrounding public safety agency leadership, and worked comfortably with 5 unique and not always like-minded board members. He's also begun the process of updating our website and community communications. His enthusiasm to tackle any task and willingness to listen and make improvements have made him a positive force for the community. So now I'll take public and board comments regarding this contract.
I would like to speak on this. I am very happy to have worked with interim chief of police and general manager, and I'm very happy not to have that combined title anymore. But I really was surprised to find out that Chief Hull is a veteran of the Air Force, because I would have thought he was a Marine, because there's just no job that he can't do, and he just tackles them. and very methodically. And I really appreciate your service in this combined position, because I know it's been a challenge with everything we've thrown at you, but you've done a great job. Not a single ball has dropped, so thank you so much for your service as both. And I look forward to working with you as interim chief of police in the future.
Other comments?
This is Sylvia. I would like to just second Eileen's comments and add that I have really appreciated his Chief Hall's willingness to meet and discuss things quickly. I tend to stop by, and he's always been available to me if I haven't been able to make an appointment in advance. So I also just second Eileen's comments, appreciate his great work and willingness to tackle anything, and great working relationship I have developed with him. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing to add there. I also want to thank Chief Hull for his wonderful service, and I'm glad to see him staying on in this interim role. And I also want to make it clear, my view, that Chief Hull and the staff and the police force, all of them have been under a lot of pressure for the last several months for a lot of reasons. And Chief Hull's held up very well. He's gotten important things past the goal line, most notably the RMS system. And so I really do appreciate your ability to get things done and your flexibility.
Hi, my question is, why is he still interim? You have split the position, you have hired a general manager, so why are we interim at this point? I understand the amendment is to an interim agreement, but the position is for chief of police. You split the position, now you're past that split. I think he's either chief or not.
I understand. This was at the direction of Mr. Holtzman of Public Law Group. And so the appointment was because it was such a short duration that we were keeping the interim title.
Did I miss my guess?
Could I ask something then?
Yes.
My take on this is that this is the kind of decision that would normally be up to a general manager, a permanent hire. And so my feeling has been that he remains interim as we get our new GM on board. Our new GM takes stock of his qualifications and the needs of the community, makes a decision about whether we need to search for another, a wider search for the right candidate, which he would still be able to participate in, or we're good the way we are. So I think it needs to be up to our GM to give some input on this.
Thank you. That's a good explanation.
I would like to comment on the change in tone and tenor of both our board meetings and this community, and I think that goes to the board as well as to the chief of police. I want to thank you all very much for the very positive change in our community. I guess one could almost say that we've reached that level of boredom that is critical for effective governments.
We hope so.
I think the better phrase would be absence of drama.
Dave Spath. Although I did not support interim Chief Hull for the combined position at the time, I've been very impressed with what he's done during that period, particularly with the dispatch operation. He's saved us a considerable amount of money. And I went to the Finance Committee meeting of the fire district the other night, and I found out that they're paying even more for dispatch services out of Richmond for El Cerrito Fire. So I just commend him for all the work that he did on getting that completed. So I think it's a good appointment. I appreciate the fact that you will then hand it over to the general manager to take a look at the overall police force and the like, and give him the opportunity to make decisions come next year. So I certainly support your action tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Len had a clarification on the, so do you want to make?
Yeah, I think a little work needs to be done on Exhibit A, to which the contract refers, and I think there was just an unwitting omission here. I think that our attorney prepared this sort of in haste at the last minute. But Exhibit A, to which the new contract refers, includes both general manager duties and chief of police duties. So with the understanding that we need to fix that, I'm ready to vote on this now.
All right. You want to make the motion?
Sure. Move to adopt the new, what are we calling this? I'm sorry.
The second amendment to the interim general manager and chief of police agreement
Like she said, I move to adopt that.
with the friendly amendment that we strike general manager from the title. It is a interim chief of police.
Actually, I think that
Oh, we need it
right
because
there
it was-
is because it was the contract
That's the
title, so
title.
you-
Right,
you
so-
need it there.
So please forget my friendly amendment.
So I will second the motion.
All right, now we will take roll call. There's no further comment? All right, Director Hasai?
Aye.
Director Cordova?
Aye.
Vice President Natoli?
Yes?
Director Welsh?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. And so we approve the appointment of Chief Hull as our continued interim chief of police. So welcome aboard for a longer time. Thank you. All right, so I now move that we adjourn for refreshments for a few moments, and if you get a chance to talk to one of our wonderful employees, and to clarify that the writer of the employment agreement was not Ms. Danforth, who is always perfect. So we'll continue at 10 to 9. All right, thank you for sticking with us, those of you who have agreed to stay. And Director Natoli is reminding that your ride may be exiting at this moment.
Marina, I saw Andy leave.
Although the board is willing to offer Uber for fundraising for this community center improvements.
Yes,
Oh, right, we're not Uber, we're
Lyft. We're Lyft.
We'll begin, K-Drive. I don't know, we'll come up with something catchy. All right, thank you. We return to discuss item 10 on the agenda. That is the first reading of Resolution 2017-14. As we begin to codify policy and procedures that have not been in place previously, we begin with a sick leave policy for our non-sworn staff. And this presentation was reviewed and written by Ann Danforth in accordance with the Healthy Workplaces, Healthy Families Act of 2014. So any comment, board comment, or questions from or comments or questions from the public?
I have one, or a couple actually. Just have to get to this thing. I'm sorry, what page is it on?
Oh, I'm sorry. It begins on page 65 of the agenda.
Okay, I couldn't quite lay my hands on it. So, first of all, this is a first reading, so by the time we get to the second reading, our new general manager, Mr. Constantoros will have had a chance to look at it, and I would ask that we get his advice on how to move on this before we make any decisions. And I noticed that there was a phrase in here that I think needs to be defined. I think I understand what we're trying to get at, but it's in quotes, and it's makeup in quotes on page 3 of the agreement at the top, second paragraph, 2030.50.
Oh, yes,
I think I understand what's being said here, but I think that phrase should be defined. And maybe our new GM could help us with that as well.
Please. Sure.
If this has been reviewed by council, and this is a first reading,
Yes.
would you go ahead and approve it, and we can always amend it at a later time? Because
Well, this is the first reading, so we can't approve it on the first reading. We have
right,
to-
but you should go ahead and approve it on the second reading also, and allow me a little time opportunity to look into it.
Well, and there's one issue here. It's the, I'm not quite sure how it works, but it may result in a net reduction in the benefit, which I'd like you to be aware of that and give your thoughts on it before we actually move on it.
Okay.
I don't think it's urgent.
I didn't realize that.
So I'm not quite sure how that works out, but I think we should be fully aware of how that does work out, and it'd be good to get your input on it.
Okay.
And to clarify that this policy would not go into effect until January 1st, 2018.
So we have time.
Yes. Yes, please.
I noticed that the accrued sick leave terminates after each year. I'm just wondering, is there any consideration of allowing a certain carryover not to exceed a certain amount? I mean, 3 days seems to be awfully short from the standpoint of...
Well, there could be. I mean, I don't know what our current policy is, but I should, but I don't admit it.
Well, neither do I.
The current policy is the accrual of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked on the job. And for the understanding that the consideration, I think, of the 24 hours, that this is applying currently to our non-sworn staff, all of whom at this point are part-time employees. So when you say 24 hours, if, let's say the employee works 4 hours a day, that in fact would be 6 days of sick leave under the 24-hour policy. If they work 6 hours a day, that would be 4 days of sick leave policy.
Right, okay, so I didn't understand that part. My point is more...
He's talking about carryover, right?
But you are, yes.
Yeah, it's more consideration of carryover at the still at the same time putting a limit on what you can
The healthy, oh, sorry.
Okay.
Well, the Healthy Families, I'm sorry, the Healthy Workplaces, Healthy Families Act, and I don't have it in front of me if I'm quoting directly, but it either suggests that you front-load the employees on January 1st with the entirety of their sick leave, and then do not accrue from calendar year to calendar year, or you allow them to accrue an hour for every 30 hours worked, but then allow for carryover. So that would, either suggestion is to make sure that as of January, that an employee has some sick time to use.
For that-
Whereas,
for that year.
yes, because if you went with the accrual method and did not allow rollover, right, it could take several months before an employee would have days.
I
Do you, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point. All I'm saying is it would be good, I think, if we do this with a full understanding of what the practice has been up to now and how this is changing it, so that we're, fully aware of that. And I think that would be really good for the GM to have a look at before we finalize it. That's all.
Absolutely.
May I make a comment, please? So do I understand correctly that any accrued sick time that the police services aide and the district administrator have accrued at the end of this calendar year will disappear?
That it would be my understanding, because on January 1st, there would be 24 hours of sick leave for the 2018 calendar year.
Okay. And just for the edification of those who may not know, this is a reduction by half of the only benefit that the district administrator, myself, and the police services aide, Andrea DiNapoli, receive. We do not receive paid vacation. We do not receive any retirement benefit. This is it. And so I would hope that the board would consider keeping the current policy. I also want to mention that in the past, Ms. DiNapoli and I have been allowed to, the phrase used here is make up time lost to illness. There's nobody who comes in and does our jobs when we're out. Recently, I was out for 30 hours for surgery, and I found out, much to my surprise, that I was no longer allowed to make up those hours, which was a sharp departure from past practice. So this has left me very much behind in the work I'm expected to perform, and it's disappointing and frustrating not to be able to fulfill my job duties to the best of my ability and to serve the community as well as I think the community expects me to do. So I hope that aspect of this can be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Because we've talked about the number 24, and that's not strictly accurate. It is 24 hours or 3 days, whichever is greater. So.
Oh, thank you.
If an employee works, let's say, 6 hours a day, you would get 18 of that. I think, or you would get 24. If you, I think if you do the math, it actually might end up being more. No?
So each pay period, Ms. DiNapoli and I earn 2 hours of sick time.
Could I make a suggestion? I
And so
think this
I
is a
think-
conversation that should be
I
had
agree.
in private,
Work on
not
this
here.
offline.
Yes.
Yes,
This
please.
is why I sort of thought the GM would have handled this.
A couple of matters for clarification. Actually, from the documentation I know, there is paid vacation for holiday paid days for the documentation I've seen afforded, at least. And so we'll need to look at any documentation that we have establishing benefits for employees so that we are all operating under the same knowledge. All right. Since this is a first reading, we will, any other further comments from board members? No. Okay. Just make sure no. Okay. All right, so moving on to item 11, Vice President Natoli will present the Kensington Community Center Wi-Fi network internet policy.
I first want to thank David Bergen, who was the primary author of this and very much appreciative of his help on this. As it turns out, we don't have the ability to limit anyone's use of the internet once we give them the password. David's able to monitor the use so we know if we're getting close to our maximum use, and as it happens, we have, and I don't know all the right terms, but we have a greater capacity for use of the internet during the daytime hours, but the evening hours when we would be here, there's a lower capacity that we have. But having said that, we're not likely to exceed it as long as people attend the meeting and not stream movies while listening to us. But putting that aside, I did read Mabry Benson's comment that she sent also from the Czech Republic, and she wanted to know if there could be a mechanism by which people have to agree. Well, that's actually in the second paragraph, where we say, by using this free service, you agree to abide by the policy herein. We don't have the ability, like you do, for example, at a private network, at a company or at Kaiser, or even the airport, where you sign in and you check a box that says you agree. We don't have that ability. So the real issue that have with this policy is disclosing to people that when you use a public Wi-Fi, people can hack into your information, and so just use caution about using any public Wi-Fi for doing anything personal. So that's the background on this policy.
I have a quick comment on that, Eileen, if I may. You know, it's almost like we're trying to, bind them in a contract with this, which I fully support, but it seems to me the only way to really do that is when you first get into the network with the password, you first have to read the disclaimer and say, I agree, before you can actually get into it. Is there any thought about doing that?
There was a thought, but we don't have the ability.
Oh.
Yeah, we don't have the ability. David, maybe you could speak to that.
I should announce my name, David Bergen. It hasn't been done tonight too much. We're getting our Wi-Fi through HughesNet, and I checked to find out if we could have a splash screen, which is what we're discussing here, and they don't have that option for us. So that there really is no way to do that. But I think if we have the policy posted in this room, that might be sufficient.
Well, I hope it is, and maybe Ann's the best to address this, but I worry about liability. That somebody can hand the password off to anybody, and so whoever gets the password, however, might be able to say, I didn't know, I didn't know, I didn't know.
Well, the password just gets you into it, and it works well in this building, not quite as well in the extra rooms here, because the router is behind that door. It is also available just outside of the building, but not very far. So I don't think it's really a problem.
And in addition, I've heard so many public warnings on the radio about the use of Wi-Fi and that your information may be compromised, so be careful if you put any personal information while using a public Wi-Fi. But I think it's somewhat well-known to people.
Yeah, you don't go into your financial institution's website because whatever password you use, somebody might be able to see, but that's true anywhere you go, whether or not you have an agreement that you click on before you get in.
I was going to raise that very issue, actually, that in many places with public Wi-Fi, you do have to click on an agreement, which of course nobody reads, but it's still there, accepting the terms and conditions, one of which I'm sure is a release of any liability.
And that's what we cannot do here.
I mean, just, we're getting sued because somebody tripped on a path, and, but at least we're covered by SDRMA, so.
But then again, if somebody did this and their password was stolen, they would not know where that happened, because more than likely they would be doing that wherever they go online.
That's true. So no internet shopping, and we're to blame the Russian hackers.
There you go.
I'm sorry, this is still a Trump-free zone.
All right. So we're going to look at the issue of liability. Is that what we're going to do? And meantime, we will post this policy. I do believe that most people are aware. I mean, if you go into your local coffee shop, you know that please do not access your medical records or your banking records. We will, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably going to have to be the solution.
So, and we'll just make perhaps quite a large print copy so that folks are able to see it. And I believe that if this goes up on our website, then we can especially highlight that by accessing the community center, you are agreeing that it is your responsibility to protect your information. All righty, I think that concludes.
One quick question. So would you like me to post this on the website tomorrow?
No, I think we will begin, we're going to follow up, and we are in process of transitioning, which I guess is an addendum Chief Hull could talk about, the website that is going to be launched shortly. Since we actually skipped over it in your general manager's report, so I'm sorry. Sure, if we could, yes.
Yeah, the district is about to launch a website that is specifically made for state agencies. So the information on the website will be in compliance with the Brown Act, and any new statute that comes in that deals with local districts or agencies, the host of that website will automatically input it in there. Therefore, as a board, as a district, we don't have that much concern, not that I'm trying to take any of your hours from you, that we will be out of compliance with any statute. Also, it's going to be easier for district staff to be able to download information onto the website itself. Currently, we're utilizing the district administrator and paying an outside web person to put information on the website. This new website, it's drag and drop, it makes it easy. I've taken a seminar, I saw it done, and was convinced that even I could probably learn to do that. So we should be saving both district time and monies being with this new website coming on board.
And I would like to take the opportunity to commend Director Cordova began championing this process 2 years ago after she saw an example, and thank you to Chief Hull for implementing the process, and so that we could begin. We had hoped to launch a little earlier than we have, but the company Streamline works specifically with special districts in California. We will be ADA compliant. We will be searchable, all kinds of exciting features. And so I thank them both because they were really the impetus to getting this done sooner, well, a little bit sooner. The later part came down to the webmaster, but so thank you both. Mr. Bergen?
I'm sure this will be done, but I'm hoping that all the information that's on the current website will be on the new one, especially all the meeting videos and the audio recordings going back as far as they're there now. That we have enough bandwidth and we have enough space on the website for all of that. As I said, I'm sure that would be the case, but I just want to make sure.
I will confirm that, in fact, that will be done. There will be a data conversion.
Great, thank you.
All righty, if there's no further comment, then I will make a motion that we close the meeting.
I'll second.
All right, we'll take a roll call. Director Hassai? Are you there? Sylvia? All right, choose.
One down.
I have to commend both directors. It was 3:30 in the morning when Director Cordova joined us, and 4:30 when Director Hassai did, so thank them both. Oh, here's Sylvia.
I'm sorry, I was on mute as Eileen had asked me to be muted, so I vote yes to adjourn.
Okay, all right. All right. Director Cordova?
Aye.
All right. Director Welsh?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Vice President Natoli?
Yes.
And I also vote yes, and so thank you all for coming. Safe travels to Director Hassai as she returns, and we, again, welcome Mr. Constantoros, and we look forward to bothering you on Monday, so you get a brief respite. All right, thank you and good night, and we'll see you on the 22nd.